The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Glory to you, O Lord. While people were listening to Jesus speak, he proceeded to tell a parable because he was near Jerusalem, and they thought that the kingdom of God would appear there immediately. So he said, a nobleman went off to a distant country to obtain the kingship for himself and then to return. He called 10 of his servants and gave them 10 gold coins and told them, engage in trade with these until I return. His fellow citizens, however, despised him and sent a delegation after him to announce, we do not want this man to be our king. But when he returned, after obtaining the kingship, he had the servants called to whom he had given the money to learn what they had gained by trading. The first came forward and said, Sir, your gold coin has earned 10 additional ones. He replied, well done, good servant. You have been faithful in this very small matter. Take charge of 10 cities. Then the second came and reported, your gold coin, sir, has earned 5 more. And to this servant too he said, you take charge of 5 cities. Then the other servant came and said, Sir, here is your gold coin. I kept it stored away in a handkerchief, for I was afraid of you, because you are a demanding man. You take up what you did not lay down, and you harvest what you did not plant. He said to him, with your own words I shall condemn you, you wicked servant. You knew I was a demanding man, taking up what I did not lay down, and harvesting what I did not plant. Why did you not put my money in a bank? Then on my return I would have collected it with interest. And to those standing by he said, take the gold coin from him and give it to the servant who has 10. But they said to him, Sir, he has 10 gold coins. He replied, I tell you, to everyone who has, more will be given, but from the one who has not, even what he has will be taken away. Now as for those enemies of mine who did not want me as their king, bring them here and slay them before me. After he had said this, he proceeded on his journey up to Jerusalem. The Gospel of the Lord. Dang. I told you it was not going to be any less apocalyptic as we went, and here we are. So, yeah. This is the last little piece before Jesus enters Jerusalem, and it's significant. The first thing to say is this is very much like the other parables that Jesus tells, in as much as he here is giving voice to what he's doing. So this is not some like abstract little teaching that Jesus wants you to know or learn, like dig in, see the moral of the story, here it is. What he's trying to show is what he himself is doing. He's giving it to us in words. So where we see a king, this at least at the beginning, this will be king, and this king journeying off and then returning, and then this and also holding these his servants to account, the nobleman holding his servants to account. We have to see there an image of God and his people. This is like standard stuff. Yeah, so this is like we're on sure ground as it relates to the interpretation of this parable. The nobleman goes off to a distant country. He calls 10 of his servants. We lose track of 7 of them, I guess, but whatever, that's fine. We don't want to know what happened to the other 7, I guess. But he's brought, he's the nobleman and his servants. This is an image for God and Israel. And then, of course, we have, God's return. So Israel is a people, they knew themselves to be in exile. They were exiled, and their understanding of that their exile meant God had abandoned them, roughly. And they returned to Israel, and they rebuild the temple, and then they're even Herod is expanding the temple, but God hasn't returned. That's their experience, right? That's where they are. God hasn't returned to us. So they anticipate God's return. And here Jesus is actually affirming their view, right? God has not yet visited his people, but in him, God is visiting his people. So as Jesus goes to Jerusalem, he is bringing with him, I should say, he is actually in the flesh, the presence of God returning to his people. But as he comes not just with mercy, as we've seen, he comes with judgment. So this is what's happening in this passage. And we see that in the life of Jesus as it is, right? He has very stern words for the people who believe that they have God on their side. And even they take for granted the fact that God is on their side, even though in reality he's not. And mainly because they've set their agenda and they're recruiting God to it, and yet God has another agenda. Yeah, so I don't know. They've tried to co-opt God. It's not. You don't want to find yourself in that position because you're invincibly incorrigible at that point. There's no way out. You cannot be corrected at that point. You think you've blended your agenda, quote unquote, with God's. So you think you're doing his bidding. I mean, you're not. This is tough. Yeah, but this it allows us to see the necessity of judgment. Jesus has to come and judge. God has to come and judge. He has to sort that out, because it's not something that will sort itself out. And as he returns to his people, it's something that he has to get clear. Now there are the pieces like buried in the parable, right before you get to the fact that Jesus has just said basically of his own character, bring these people before me and slay them. Right? Is anybody concerned about that? I mean, I don't see too much concern about that. No? I won't bother preaching about it then, will I? Yeah, no. You don't want to it's too early in the morning probably. I don't know what it is. I don't know. It's just to say this is it, okay? It's to say the seriousness of God's way. Yeah, we see Jesus as he's going. He's demanding everything of his followers. And he can demand everything because he's giving everything. So we are that people God has chosen to be his own. And we are constituted God's people by Jesus giving it all. So we have life in us, and we have life as a people because Jesus has given us everything. Do we live like that? Do we act like that? Right? These are really big questions, especially in contemporary America. Are we actually doing it? What does it look like to live the gospel personally and relationally and socially? Do any of us know? I'm not sure. We don't have too many examples of it. It's one of the reasons why I love Dorothy Day. And if you don't know her, you should look her up. But she just couldn't, I don't know, she was just agitated. She was just agitated because all she wanted to do was live the gospel, and was never convinced in relatively modern America that she was never convinced that she was doing it. And I agree with her. But that's our position as well. Are we doing it or are we not? This is the seriousness of God's way, such that the people who oppose themselves to God's agenda or try to drag God along with theirs need this. They need to be uprooted. They need to be confronted and conquered. Even though we say, I would hope that the conquering of people's hearts is enough. You know what I mean? I hope that it's not simply, brush everyone aside. And because this is not the way of Jesus either. We see that. But our hearts need to be conquered there, because we're too keen, again, to recruit God to our agenda, to be writing our own story with our life, and not be terribly concerned about what it means to live God's story. Because here, actually, right, when God is returning to his people to bring mercy and judgment, there's a recognition that Israel ought to have been about God's tasks while he was away, the coins and the return that they're getting on them and the rest. And there are some who have gained a return, right? There are some who have made a return, and some who have hidden the coin. This should for us hearken back to the Sermon on the Mount, among other parts of Jesus' preaching, where he's saying, who lights a lamp to hide it under a bushel basket? Right? In Israel, God has lit a lamp to give light to all, to give light to the world. And they've taken it for themselves. They've hidden it. Right? So, and this is the good of the ancestral faith, Moses and the prophets and the rest. Yeah. But how much more do we have? I mean, we have Christ Jesus. Do our lives look more gospel aligned today than they did 2,000 years ago with people who didn't even know Jesus? Is there more true piety among God's people today than there was 2,000 years ago? Do you know what I mean by piety? Say the devout life. And what I mean is like hearts of devotion. Do we love God with more of our heart, life, soul, and strength than a mind, soul, and strength than the people of Israel 2,000 years ago? These are massive and very difficult questions, and the church has given them to us for our reflection today. So this is our challenge, really, is to say, okay, are we simply trying to co-opt God for our agenda, or do we, are we pleased to have God as our king? Do we just want the stuff without the king, or do we want the king when this is our king? Yeah. So, and really at the end of it all, all these big questions that I'm offering this morning, they resolve on Jesus, because he is the king. He's God's anointed king. He is the King of the Jews. He is the Lord of all nations. He's the rightful ruler of every human heart. And that's the reality that we have to conform ourselves to. That's the truth that our minds have to be conformed to, and not just our minds, our hearts, our lives. We have to uphold this reality, Jesus as King, in everything we think and say and do. And it is he who is going to, when he returns at last, he's going to have us account for what he's given us and what we've done with it. At least in the sense, right, that he's invited us to participate in his own life of love. Have we lived that out as fully and freely and as generously as we should, or have we been living our own little, less than good? I don't want to be generous myself. Our little lives. No, we've been called into God's story to live for him and his purposes. And the good news is that we're not doing that by ourselves, right? Jesus is making it happen in us. And he wants to work his goodness through us so that we can be the radically generous people that image God's goodness, that image his own life of love for his world. Just as we know God to be sheer generosity for how he has brought us to life, so now we have to reflect that generosity to all.